Hello and welcome to episode 67 of Mark Talks to his mobile phone about things. Today is Monday, I think it's the 8th of March 2021. Right now on ITV there is the Harry and Meghan interview, which I'm not watching. As indeed I'm not watching MasterChef either. Those of you that have been paying close attention, all two of you, will probably notice I do these at around about the time something on television that I'm not particularly interested in watching. Normally it's MasterChef, but not always. And anyway, tonight, episode 67, I'm going to be talking about one of my favourite albums. Unsurprisingly, if you've got the ability to read my t-shirt, you can probably tell which one it's going to be. But for those of you that haven't, New Order, Brotherhood, their 1986 album, which was released on the 29th of September 1986. So the last episode where I talked about New Order a couple of weeks ago kind of left off with Shame and State of the Nation, a 12-inch and 7-inch single which was released somewhat strangely on the 22nd of September 1986, and exactly a week later New Order released the Brotherhood album. And New Order being New Order, they were still in the point where they weren't going to be releasing the single on the album, even though it was clearly finished and recorded and written at the same time. Now, as I mentioned in the previous episode, State of the Nation is probably my least favourite New Order single from the period when they were together in the Factory years, running between 1980 and 1993. And the reason being is John Robey. John Robey is not a great producer, or at least he wasn't a great producer for New Order. And the band, I don't think, ever felt that they'd quite mastered this song, and they never quite got it right. Because if you open inside the inside original 12-inch inner sleeve, State was recorded in April 1985 in Tokyo, and Shame was recorded in Manchester, New York and Los Angeles between October 1985 and April 1986. And this was the first of the 12-inch sleeves, of the record sleeves, by Peter Saville, that really was almost featureless. One of the previous singles, Subculture, had a completely black sleeve with only the label information showing. This one, there's no idea that this is a record. There's no information around what the record actually is, but it's not great at all. And so State and Shame of the Nation came out the week before the album was released, and it was available on some of the CD editions of the first release of the Brotherhood album. And the Brotherhood album, the band's fourth studio album, here is a Factory Records CD, and here is a Factory Records vinyl edition, is a strange beast by the band. It was recorded over a number of sessions in Dublin, in Liverpool, and I think in London as well. The idea was that they'd use Windmill Lane in Dublin, which was where U2 did a lot of their recording at the time, to finish and mix the album, but that's not quite how it worked. And so when the band went into the studio, they'd had a number of songs on this album that they'd got ready, but there was about 4 or 5 that they wrote in the studio with the hope that they'd somehow patch together enough material. Now, Brotherhood is an album very much of two sides. Side one is rockier, with Paradise, Weirdo, As It Is When It Was, which had been played in 1985, Broken Park Promise, and Way of Life. And those were all kind of quite heavy, with 4 acoustic drums and guitars slathered all over the place. Side 2 is a far more gentle ride, actually, with the brilliant Bizarre Love Triangle, an absolute New Order classic, All Day Long, Angel Dust, and Every Little Counts. And Bizarre Love Triangle had first been played live, I think, around about April 1985. As It Is When It Was had first been played around about May 1985. Other songs were slowly introduced into the set, so they were playing songs from the album before the preceding album, Low Life, had come out. And on a recent re-listen to this, and by the way, I re-listen to all of the albums before I do a session like this, because I can't rely on my foggy memory that was first formed in 1988 about these albums. I have to go back and listen to them again. The first thing I've noticed is that Way of Life actually is both, according to Peter Hook, the riff from Age of Consent, played backwards, but also it features the guitars, the acoustic guitars, the same kind of acoustic guitar rhythm that's right at the very end of Love Will Tear Us Apart, although it's buried deep in the mix. And there's a couple of strange things actually. One thing is this features one of the only New Order releases that I don't have. There was a promotional 12-inch of Way of Life that was issued in America, and due to a combination of not being bothered and forgetfulness, I have failed to pick one up in the past 35 years. It's probably middle of the pack in terms of New Order albums. It's better, I think, than Movement. It's not quite as good as Low Life or Power, Corruption and Lies. Definitely not as good as Technique or Republic, which will probably put me on one of those hills that I have to die on. Now, there are many hills. I will die on many of them, but I'd rather not die on those hills. I'd rather be the one that proves to you absolutely and conclusively with graphs and a computer that I am absolutely right. Because if there is one thing about the internet, it largely exists for people to feel vindicated and correct and somehow superior over other people. I don't quite know. I definitely know that that's applied to me on various occasions. There have definitely been occasions when late at night I'm arguing with somebody on the internet, and sometimes you have to ask yourself a question. And this is why I've deleted some tweets sometimes, is it necessary? Is it kind? Is it going to be helpful? And if it isn't, should you really do it? And I think there's quite a few people, both on Twitter and on Good Morning Britain, that never think that way around anything before they put it out into the outside world. I'm not quite sure if anyone will find 45 minutes of me talking about a New Order album useful or kind or helpful. But I'm going to do it anyway, because it's that, or I just surf the internet whilst MasterChef plays and I listen to music. I think this is perhaps more productive. Anyway, Brotherhood, I bought this album in 1988, I think, for about £3.50 from Second City Sounds. Somebody had clearly got fed up with New Order doing all their commercial shit and had taken the albums into trade and turned into beer money, and I took those albums and I took them home and grew old with them. And this is one of them, and you'll actually see this copy has been out. This edge has been in the sun, which is why there's a strange kind of green tint to my copy of Brotherhood. I am not perfect, but 35 years of being in the sun will do that to a record. So this is a Factory Records version, which is 9 songs, and this is the Factory Records compact disc, which is 10 songs. So the 10th song is State of the Nation. Not that you can necessarily see that. Again, the cover is very austere, it's very technical and industrial, and it's just like a sheet of metal that's been photographed that's got some phraseology on there, which says, I think, what is it? Titan Zeke 0-15. Not that that means anything. I probably should have Googled that, but there you are. So Brotherhood is an unusual album in the New Order pantheon. Pantheon's a great word. I should probably use it more, because it's split into 2 halves, and as I've said, one side is acoustic and rocky, and the other side is more electronic and more kind of fully into the synths. And at this point, the bands were frankly in desperate need of money, and I'll explain why. There's 2 things. The first thing is, in 1986, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs wanted to do a tax audit of the band's nightclub, the Hacienda, and the band had run what is basically dual accounting, and they had a book that was official to be given to the taxman, and a book that was unofficial that was the actual accounts, and lo and behold, the person picked up the wrong book when HMRC visited and gave them the actual accounts and not the sanitised version. Now, as we will know many times, Factory Records was incompetently managed from a financial perspective, and that's not to say that I'm trying to be bitchy about it. They just weren't run competently. And that's why you had to have a fake set of books that you gave to the taxman. By the way, this information is, as far as I can recall, fully detailed in this book by Peter Hook. Maybe not quite so fully detailed in this book by Bernard, and mentioned in this book by Stephen Morris. Vital and essential texts for a fan of the band. The second thing is, once they were having a look at that, HMRC decided that perhaps the band's accounts needed to be looked at, and this is, I think, more detailed, perhaps better and more comprehensively in the Peter Hook book, where I'm going to quickly point out that I should have done this earlier, but I didn't because I want it to be live. So Joy Division and T-shirts, page 184. So you'll probably not necessarily know that before 1986, Joy Division T-shirts were not exactly plentiful, certainly not official ones. So the band here had a meeting with the taxman, and what had happened is there was as Peter Hook says, there's a surreal exchange around Joy Division T-shirts, with us proudly proclaiming that we did not sell merchandise because we didn't believe in self-promotion, preferring to let the music speak for itself. At which point, one of the taxmen, said, "How come wherever I go I see Joy Division and New Order T-shirts and for sale?" And the band said, well, actually, you know, we don't tend to do those. We don't license Joy Division T-shirts. At which point the taxman said, "I don't believe you, and we'll be fining you accordingly." So therefore they were fined £10,000 by the taxman for not doing Joy Division T-shirts, where enterprising bootleggers were doing their own Joy Division T-shirts. And that's pretty strange. And not only that, there are other things around the Hacienda, which is under the spotlight was factory's fraudulent habit of putting money into the Hacienda without it going into our limited company first. And Rob had no idea that it had been illegal. And that's, you know, a thing. So the HMRC really tore the band apart here and cost the band an enormous amount of money, audited them endlessly. Even one of the taxmen asked Peter Hook to sign his albums, which I think you can probably imagine the response which came out of him from that. But that added an extra layer of financial pressure on top of it. And then on top of that, it became apparent that Factory Records weren't paying the band. So when the band said, "We'd like some royalties for some of our record sales," Factory said, "Well, we haven't got it." Now, I've mentioned it in a previous episode in relation to U2 and Island Records. But instead, the solution to that was a compilation album, which I'll touch upon in a minute. So, the band were, perhaps it's fair to say, not competently managed, and I think the evidence is all there. Now, the next thing that the band did is they went on tour, and naturally, with the album in the charts and out of the charts, they went on tour and released this Bizarre Love Triangle. You will know this song, even if you don't know it's called Bizarre Love Triangle. It was in and out of the charts with a bullet at number 53 for 1 week. It's probably the smallest selling New Order single in the entire of the Factory years. And it's an incredible single. It is, I think, an absolute classic. This is the song that when I heard it, I was like, I need to know more about that band. I need to listen to that band. I need to understand what it is about that band, because that band, there's something about that band that I love. And there's a thing, I think probably Bizarre Love Triangle is, if you're going to introduce somebody to the world of New Order, it's probably the first song which you should probably go for, because it's got the mixture of melancholy and joy. It's got and all those things, and it sounds like a human being with light and shade in it. Also, it's great to dance to, and I once heard it played at ear-splitting volume that may very well have given me tinnitus in a nightclub in Leicester in 1992 at about 5 minutes past 10 on student night, just after it opened, and it sounded like God herself was kissing me. It is an incredible song. Now, there are a number of different versions of this single. Here is the 7-inch version, which is backed with Bizarre Dub Triangle. And what you'll notice, perhaps a little strangely, is that the 7-inch version of this has Hookie's bass all over it indeed. And the 12-inch version, certainly the A side of the 12-inch version, has absolutely no bass on it at all. And I only found that out for myself in 2014. I was doing a remix of the track, so I do some remixing. I take existing tracks and I kind of re-edit them and put bits together and move bits about and add effects and all that type of stuff. And I was doing this remix of Bizarre Love Triangle. It was about 10-11 minutes long, where I was taking all the different separate unique parts that are on the A and the B of the 12-inch and the 7-inch. And then I noticed that there was no bass on it. And this was I'd probably done 95% of the mix at that point. and I had to go back in and identify all the bits of the 7-inch that had live bass on it from Peter Hook, and then slot them back into their right place. Which means that the 12-inch mix of Bizarre Love Triangle, somewhat bizarrely, doesn't have the band's most unique human sound, which is Peter Hook on bass. Again, went in and out of the charts at number 54, which is staggering, really. But then it was the first time, apart from Subculture, that the band had released a song that had been on an album. The album had been out for like 3 months by the time that the single came out at the end of November, and the band were off touring in America. Now, giving a further example of where New Order perhaps took a less than professional approach to certain things, they released a 12-inch of Bizarre Love Triangle with State of the Nation on, and side 2 is Bizarre Love Triangle and State of the Nation, and side 1 is the 12-inch mix of Bizarre Love Triangle and a track called I Don't Care. And I bought this 12-inch to find out, what is this New Order track called I Don't Care, and is it any good? Well, it's the dub version of Bizarre Dub Triangle. And when Rob Gretton, the band's manager, was on the phone to the American label, someone at the American label said, what's the name of the dub mix? Went, I don't care. And then they wrote I Don't Care, and I Don't Care went on the label. That's professionalism for you, folks. Here's a shrink wrap 12-inch, the American version. There is an alternate mix on the Canadian 7-inch of Bizarre Love Triangle, which I think was taken from a soundtrack album and also later appeared on a compilation cassette. I've never got that 7-inch because, again, I forgot to pick it up, and I've never really cared too much around it. But there's a 4-track 12-inch single from the US. Now, whilst the band were recording in Liverpool in 1986, they had there was another band that was recording in the other studio. That band were Echo and the Bunnymen, and Echo and the Bunnymen were in between drummers during some of the sessions. So they had Pete DeFreitas, who left. They had another drummer called Blair Cunningham, who played with them live. David Palmer of ABC, later to join The, was playing drums with them for some of the session, but they found themselves without a drummer, and Stephen Morris stepped in and played drums on some Echo and the Bunnymen tracks. He's not credited on all of them. He's credited on at least one, which is a cover of the Doors' Soul Kitchen, but the other ones, it is unconfirmed which one of those are the Echo and the Bunnymen tracks. All of them, some of them that he may have played on, but he does play drums on an Echo and the Bunnymen album, which of course I only found out the other week, because I've got better things to do than read the credits to CDs. Honest gov, honest. Now, whilst we're also talking about the Brotherhood album, in 1994, somewhat bizarrely, hang on a second, 1994, somewhat bizarrely, Bizarre Love Triangle was issued as a CD single in America, and this is backed with, and this is the only CD single release of Bizarre Love Triangle that's officially been issued, that has the album version, the extended dance mix, I Don't Care, a version of State of the Nation, and the single remix of Bizarre Love Triangle. Probably hard to get now, not really worth bothering with. Okay, so moving on from that, and by the way, I've only dealt with one album. There's another 3 to come before the band get to their next studio album. So the next thing that the band did was that they went into the studio and they started recording. I think might have been A Division in London, and so you're aware, there's a residential recording studio in London. I can't remember the name of it, which has 3 studios in it, and the band were recording. Next door to them were the Communards, and then next door to them were the Pet Shop Boys. And so therefore, what you'll be surprised to hear is that the band's next single, True Faith, the band's next single, was recorded next door, quite literally next door to the Communards recording Don't Leave Me This Way. I think it's Don't Leave Me This Way. And then also next door to the Pet Shop Boys while they were recording It's a Sin. And if you look at the production credits on those songs, they share very similar producers because they're often just going from one room to another. Now, this is the one of the very first 7-inch singles that I bought. And this is very important to me. This I bought for 69p. Now in ye olde days, and I'm aware that everything is ye olde days, you can buy 7-inch singles from newsagents once they'd fallen out of the charts. So my favourite day of the week was either Monday morning or probably about a Tuesday afternoon, actually. So on the Monday morning, Woolies would start discounting all of their albums. So all of the albums which have fallen out of the top 40 and all of the singles which have fallen out of the top 40 were then relegated from full price. So for example, you know, £10.99 for an album, £3.49 for a 12-inch single, £1.99 for, and they were put in, you know, racks, and you could go and pick out the song that had just fallen out of the charts. And since I was adept at expanding my financial limitations, almost every record that I bought from Woolies the day that it hit the discount rack. So I would go down to from my school, I would walk to the local Woolies, I'd clean out all the 7-inch singles with the pocket money which I got on Saturday, and all the 12 inches and all the discounted things. I'd buy my records, I'd take them home, and I'd get them all for pretty much half price about 3 weeks after they came out. This one I paid 69p for from a newsagent in the days when newsagents would sell either discounted movie novelisations, cheap paperbacks, the romance novels, and also 7-inch singles, because they all fit in roughly the same size slot. And then I just scroll through and go, I'll have that, I'll have that, I'll have that. And that's where I got almost all of my 7-inch singles from. And this is, you know, the first new order 7-inch single I got, which is True Faith, backed with 1963. And True Faith is, as you probably know, one of New Order's best songs. I think that the recorded version on the 12-inch is not their best version of the song. There are other better versions of the song, better remixes. Here is a Factory Records 12-inch which contains full-length, unedited 12-inch versions of the songs. And as you can see, following a typography and a common approach. Now this image has become iconic. This image of a leaf against a blue background, and the story behind that blue background is that Peter Saville saw a leaf on his car as he came out of a meeting, and it was just this shade of crispy gold, which had fallen down off a tree, and he was like, that looks beautiful, and he took the leaf, took it home, and now that leaf then, you know, resides forever on the cover of this album. And I've seen this actual leaf. It still, certainly as of 2003, it was still existed. It was inside a glass case at the Design Museum on London South Bank, and I was thoroughly unimpressed, having seen the cover, having seen the actual leaf that was used for this. So True Faith was the lead-off single for the Next New Order album, and the Next New Order album was Substance, 1987. I don't know when this album was released in 1987, presumably after June the 26th. And it was a compilation of the band's first 12-inch A-sides. There are other versions of this album that have been released. So, for example, there is a CD edition which features 12 B-sides, one for near enough every single one of the 12 inches, but not all of them. So the vinyl edition, 12 tracks, featuring almost all of the 12-inch mixes, but a couple of additions. Temptation and Confusion have been re-recorded because the band weren't happy with the final versions that they'd released as the 12 inches, and certainly Temptation has grown into a monster since it was first released. And also a re-recording of Confusion in 1987. The band also remixed Subculture to take out some of the more egregious elements of the John Roby remix, such as the stuttering and the repeated subsections, and also put the 12-inch mixes of all the other A-sides on, including the re-recording of Ceremony. So actually, of the first 5 songs on this album, Ceremony, Temptation and Confusion were re-recorded. I don't even know if that's of any relevance or interest. The strange thing is for an album that is so seminal, so loved, so influential, and so important to the band's career is this album has been deleted probably for 20 years or so. Certainly a vinyl edition of it hasn't been available for a very long time indeed. And I think when Factory Records went bankrupt in 1993 or 1992, the vinyl editions were not repressed of most of the albums until maybe 2008. This compilation I don't think has been in print on vinyl for something like 25 years, which is pretty amazing, all things considered. But the reason that Substance existed is twofold. Firstly, Tony Wilson wanted something to play in his car, and the cassette version of this, by the way, features a number of extra songs. So the CD version features all of those 12-inch A-sides and 12 B-sides, but not all 12 B-sides off all 12 B-sides, if that makes sense. Some of the B-sides, such as Procession, Mesh, for example, extra tracks like Murder, were not on B-sides of singles, or they were on a single which had 2 or 3 B-sides. And so, for example, Murder's on there, but Murder's a separate single, but it's only on the CD version, which means remixes of Subculture and Shellcock are not on here. Cries and Whispers isn't on here either. It's a bizarre dub triangle isn't on here. It's a pretty strange selection of B-sides, but on the other hand, they didn't charge any more for it to have a second CD of all the B-sides on. Now, the other thing around this album is that the royalty rates are different on this album. Factory Records got 75% and the band got 25%, which, considering that it was put out in order to make sure that Factory Records could afford to pay the band the royalties that they couldn't afford to pay them, yeah, it's all a bit weird. Substance sold 10 million copies. I was thinking this the other day with Mogwai being #1, is how strange it is that you know, records I like still get to #1, and the vast majority of the #1s being, of course, absolute nonsense, as they always were. I don't think my tastes are that obscure in terms of music, but when it comes to bands like New Order, they were big business. Big money was going through the band. They were selling a large number of tickets, 10 million albums, and yet somehow they were still broke. As is always the case, I think we can ascribe human stupidity to a lot of the decisions which were made, which perhaps went a little bit wonky. Now, I'm moving around the chronology a little bit because at the same time, a remix of True Faith was issued. This is the UK 12-inch, which this cover is absolutely beautiful. This is the Shep Pettibone remix of True Faith, which, if you're a fan of Michael J. Fox movies, you will hear on the soundtrack to the film Bright Lights, Big City. And effectively, aside from the vocals and the bass, it's a complete re-recording. It runs at a different tempo. It's got a different it's got different rhythm tracks, different bass, different keyboards, everything. It's a fantastic remix, one of the best 12-inch remixes that there ever was, because it was almost like a new song with the same melody, and it also sounds an awful lot like Whitney Houston's "I Want to Dance with Somebody." Because the preset sounds that are being used on the drum machine are exactly the same as the one on the Whitney song. I shouldn't mention that, but I have done a mix where I've put this 12-inch and the Whitney Houston mix together so that they run inside each other. Now, for the more train spottery of you, there was a second version of the 12-inch that was only released in Australia, which I ordered in 2001, and this featured an exclusive remix of the song Paradise from the album Brotherhood, remixed by a guy called, I think, Robert Rastick, which was unavailable anywhere else. It was only released on a 12-inch in Australia. So, opening this out, imagine I bought this from Australia from some guy on eBay. I was like so excited. I get to listen to the New Order remix I've only read about for the past 15 years. And lo and behold, the idiot that had sent it to me from Australia had sent it without a dust jacket in, had sent it in a great big jiffy bag, with an open edge, so that the record had quite literally just gone whoop, 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 all the way between Australia and England, and naturally smashed into 3 pieces. And I had to get my money back from eBay. Luckily, I was able to sellotape it together so that I could actually play the record, but I only wanted to play one side of it. So I sellotaped the record together in order to play one side of it and then record it to a cassette. I was very unhappy that day. I later bought another copy, and here it is, of course, which is not smashed into 3 pieces by an absolute nincompoop in Australia who doesn't know how to send records in the post. So I'm going to put that back in there. So that's the True Faith remix. And then the next thing that happened is that the band played the Glastonbury Festival. And the Glastonbury Festival in 1987 is interesting because that's the 3rd album of the 4 I'm going to be talking about in this session. And Glastonbury was released in 1992 as a single disc live at the BBC album. So this is a 60-minute recording of New Order live at the Glastonbury Festival, even though the cover photographs on here are taken from Brixton in 1989. This is almost definitely available on YouTube, by the way. You don't have to pay big money for it. And as far as I understand it, this was only released in 1992 because the band could get a cheque for £5,000, and they decided that they could quite fancied a cheque for £5,000, so they stuck it out and licensed a BBC Radio 1 live in concert album. It's not been reissued. There was also a limited edition vinyl pressing of it. I picked up a copy without a sleeve because a copy with a sleeve is staggeringly expensive. But this copy I listened to last week. It's exactly as I remember it, and I remember very, very clearly every time I listen to it, especially the end of The Perfect Kiss. Bearing in mind this is New Order's first live album, so the end of The Perfect Kiss, I remember listening to it, and I'm always taken back to who I was in late 1988 when I just first got into New Order, and I was listening to New Order at Glastonbury as a 14-year-old kid in the kitchen and the dining hall of King's Norton Boys School, where I grew up, and thinking one day in my mind I might get to see New Order. You know, when I was 15 or 14, that was the limit of my ambitions, is one day I'll get to see New Order. One day, you know, I'll get to be an adult, I'll get to be happy. And by the way, I'm overjoyed to tell you that I've both managed to see New Order, and I've both managed to become, at least on the outside, an adult, and also happy, which is, you know, very, very underrated in the world. So the next release that happens, and this is a little bit of a strange one, is this soundtrack album called Salvation. The film is terrible. New Order recorded 5 tracks for it, and I think most of these tracks were recorded around about the time of Low Life, because a number of the songs, Sputnik, Skull Crusher, for example, Let's Go, they'd been played live, or they'd been circulating amongst the fan base. Also a track called Touched by the Hand of God, which is available on this in a remix form as well as an original form, and it sounds very slow and clunky. And I think the band went back to that song and they thought they've got some potential in that song. That song's pretty good, and so it became their next single. So what's the first thing you do when you've released an album of all your singles? You've compiled it all together. It's sold 10 million. The next record that you put out, the next single that you've got, a brand new, previously not on album, 7-inch single, which no one's ever heard before, called Touched by the Hand of God, that's actually on the soundtrack to a crappy movie. This is re-recorded and remixed by the band alongside Arthur Baker. It features a fantastic video, primarily because the band hired a whole bunch of hair metal leather jackets and pretended to be someone like Motley Crue or Poison or those other terrible bands that were wiped out in the great Nirvana storm of 1991. And Touched by the Hand of God had a 7-inch, it had a 12-inch, again with an extended mix on. It also had, for the first time, a contemporaneous CD single release. And the CD single release Touched by the Hand of God is here. It's a 5-inch CD, and it features completely different B-sides. So the 7-inch mix of Touched by the Hand of God was not available until 1994. You could get 2 remixes. You could get 1 remix on the Salvation soundtrack. You could get a 12-inch mix on here. But you couldn't get the 7-inch mix unless you bought this, which I'll come to shortly. And on the B-side, the extra tracks for this were a remix of Confusion, so the 1987 re-recording of Confusion, and what called itself the original mix of Temptation, but thanks to a human error, somebody picked out the 1987 recording for the Substance album and stuck it on there. At which point, I think Tony Wilson decided he was going to give up all hope of ever having any faith in humanity. Not that he may necessarily have ever had any. And but Touched by the Hand of God still had a life, and to plug some extra life into the Substance album, the band issued a remix of Blue Monday by Quincy Jones. And the remix of Blue Monday by Quincy Jones comes in a number of forms. So effectively, Quincy Jones now had 3 people in 3 separate studios, all under his guidance and supervision, remix the song, and then he would pick his favourite parts of each of those 3 remixes and stick them all together. Blue Monday 1988 is probably the biggest selling version of the single. It's not the best selling version of it. It's got lots of overdubs, it's got lots of strange extra noises in it, and it generally sounds a bit more whizzy and a bit more bangy and a bit more 1988. There's a promo 12-inch of Blue Monday, which features what calls itself, I think, a DJ only version, which is later released as the I think the Blue Monday 1988 dub mix. It's not very good, but Blue Monday 1988 is okay. It also saw a number of CD single releases, and for the first time ever, Blue Monday saw an official retail non-communist Poland 7-inch version, which is heavily edited versions of Blue Monday and Beach Buggy. And also, this is the version of Blue Monday that has the video with the dog and the flying tennis ball. In America, there was another version of Blue Monday that was released, this time with Touched by the Hand of God on the B-side, which was mixed by Arthur Baker. That's the QS Records version. This version is signed by Bernard. I'm not sure where he signed it. By the looks of what's on here, it looks like it was signed by him on a radio promo tour in about 1996. And this is the CD single of Blue Monday that was released in America. And I bought this version of Blue Monday because it's backed with Touched by the Hand of God. And you can get the 7-inch version of Touched by the Hand of God, and you can get the dub remix of Touched by the Hand of God on here, which you couldn't get on CD anywhere else in the world at the time that I bought it in 1988. But a remix of Blue Monday, the world's full of remixes of Blue Monday, and there are plenty more remixes of Blue Monday to come throughout this and the rest of our lives. And that kind of brings us up to the end of where we go with the album Brotherhood, Substance, Live at Glastonbury, and the Salvation soundtrack. The only thing I haven't mentioned so far is the 2008 reissue of Brotherhood. This is the only version of Brotherhood that's been reissued, by the way. And it's got a second disc on it. The second disc of this has flaws. It's probably the nicest way of describing it. And those flaws being is that they put the wrong mixes on there. So the second disc of the 2008 version of Brotherhood has the 12 inches of Bizarre Love Triangle, 1963, the Shep Pettibone remix of True Faith, Touched by the Hand of God, Blue Monday 1988, Evil Dust, which was a version of Angel Dust from the Brotherhood album that was on the CD video of True Faith and on a compilation album called No Alternatives, a dub mix of True Faith, and that dub mix of True Faith, they pulled out the wrong version, so they pulled out a version called the Eshrima Dub from 1994 that has very little relation to True Faith itself, and the instrumental version of Blue Monday from 1988 called Beach Buggy. As was the case at the time, the mastering house doing the second discs had gone bankrupt, so it was largely a CDR that was compiled by somebody at the band's record company. No remastering really occurred, and as you will have noticed, they picked out the wrong mixes. Later versions of this have been corrected so that it is the correct version of True Faith dub mix that's on there. But the Eshrima dub is only otherwise available on one of those multi-CD Paul Oakenfold at Cream type mixed DJ CD things that you've no doubt heard coming out of a car sometime between 1996 and now at an ear-splitting volume. And as you know, anybody that listens to music in a car, the rules are the worse the music, the louder it has to be. There are only 2 times I've heard someone playing decent music loudly out of a car stereo. One was AC/DC and the other one was Depeche Mode, and I was staggered at both times that was the case, and it wasn't just your standard put a donk on it, ear-splitting, techno, gabba gabba hey bollocks. Anyway, that's it for me talking about the 4 albums, Brotherhood, Substance, Live at Glastonbury and Salvation. I'm going to wrap up here. Not going to talk about New Order again for a little while. Although you haven't necessarily seen it, I have been wearing the sign of the beast here with my New Order t-shirt. I'm not sure when the next episode is or what it's going to be about. I might very well be talking about a band called Mogwai who have become #1 in the past couple of weeks. I might be talking about something else. No idea yet. As usual, don't be a dick. If you've got any comments, put them underneath and do it nicely. And it's been a pleasure. I hope you all look after yourselves, and I hope to see you all again soon. Okay, and bye.